God may let you go first, but he will never let you be the finish line. He does not compete when it comes to his glory. It's his or the highway. That's why checking your ego at the front door of pioneering journeys is important. Not only will it help you last, it will keep the focus on the Lord, who is the only star of the show. This is the Daily Recharge, an Endurance Movement original. I'm Reginald Hinton Jr., and welcome to today's opportunity to renew your thinking, align with God's design, and become who you really are. If the Daily Recharge helps you make your next move, subscribe to Endurance Movement on YouTube and turn on notifications so you'll know when your next recharge is ready. Now, let's get recharged. Stay modest. That's life coaching in general and leadership development specifically, especially if you're a God-inspired pioneering leader. Just because God created the opportunity doesn't mean he wants to compete with you for recognition. Each pioneering journey is bigger than the pioneer. It's mostly about the platform it creates to promote the progenitor. That's noteworthy. Write this down. God-inspired pioneering journeys are about the progenitor, not the pioneer. Progenitor is a fancy word that means originator. If God inspired the journey, then the pioneer isn't really a solo pioneer. He or she is a sourced pioneer. And acknowledging the source is the real win. That's maturity. That's when you really step into who you were created to be. And John the Baptist, or Baptizer, excelled at it. The following verses highlight him preserving modesty while executing his pioneering leadership mandate. Those who repent I baptize with water, but there is coming a man after me who is more powerful than I. In fact, I'm not even worthy enough to pick up his sandals. He will submerge you into union with the Spirit of holiness and with a raging fire. That's Matthew 3, verse 11 from the Passion Translation. Notice this part again. There is coming a man after me who is more powerful than I. In fact, I'm not even worthy enough to pick up his sandals. That's real life modesty. And John showed that it's possible for people other than Jesus. That's big because it's easy to think some things are only possible for Jesus and then make excuses to be normal. But John offers hope and a different alternative. And if you want to be the pioneering leader God created you to be, remaining modest like John is critical. So how do you remain modest when God reroutes you to pioneer? Here's the first way. Keep God front and center. That's what John did in the verses we read from Matthew 3. When people tried to make it about him, he consistently redirected them to the main attraction, Jesus. Here's another example of him doing just that. The very next day, John saw Jesus coming to him to be baptized, and John cried out, "Look, there he is, God's Lamb. He takes away the sin of the entire world. I told you that a mighty one would come who is far greater than I am, because he existed long before I was born." That's John 1, verses 29 and 30 from the Passion Translation. While baptizing, the pioneering method of ministry John introduced and led to his nickname, took the attention off himself. He directed it to Jesus, God's Lamb. And that's an exceptional model to follow if you want to remain modest when God reroutes you to pioneering. When people celebrate your mandate, message, or methods, as I shared on the Shift podcast that led to this conversation, mention the true source of all you do, God. And the more you do it, the more you'll be reminded of who your pioneering journey is all about. Now, here's another way you can remain modest. Keep yourself in the rear view. That is, if God is the main attraction, remember that you're not. And this isn't up for debate. No one compares to God. So anyone who competes with him is crazy. That's a wild goose chase. John showed us the alternative here. John answered them, "A person cannot receive even one thing unless God bestows it. You've heard me tell you that I am not the Messiah, but certainly I am the messenger sent ahead of him. He is the bridegroom, and the bride belongs to him. I am the friend of the bridegroom who stands nearby and listens with great joy to the bridegroom's voice. Because of his words, my joy is complete and overflows. It is necessary for him to increase and for me to decrease." That's John 3, verses 27 through 30 from the Passion Translation. This line hits. It is necessary for him, meaning Jesus, to increase, and for me, meaning John, to decrease. That's living with self-importance in the rear view. Who you have been or currently are isn't the focal point. It's who is operating through you and who you're becoming like in the process. Don't miss what I just shared. God's finish line isn't just his glory. It's also reflecting it in you. Here's proof. For he knew all about us before we were born, and he destined us from the beginning to share the likeness of his Son. This means the Son is the oldest among a vast family of brothers and sisters who will become just like him. That's Romans 8, verse 29 from the Passion Translation. He wants us to be just like Jesus, whose entire life glorified God. That's the greatest win. And when you become like Jesus, you won't just glorify God, you also become who God created you to be along the way. Let's take a moment and recap today's recharge. If you want to remain modest while God is rerouting you to a pioneering leadership journey, first, keep God front and center in all you do. Then keep yourself in the rear view. That's how pioneering leaders remain modest. That's what they reuse when God reroutes them. Now, here are practical ways to demonstrate what you discovered in this video. Practice redirecting people to God. Think of scenarios where people ask you about the mandate, message, or method that you're pioneering and work on responses that recenter the attention on God. For example, when people ask me about endurance movement, I often begin with, God is bringing out his best in me, and I'm grateful. That always sets the tone of the conversation to be centered on God's work through me while keeping my contributions in the rear view. And let me be honest, this is a conversation already in progress, as I mentioned earlier. If you want to hear where it started, the Shift podcast episode entitled How to Know If You're a Pioneering Leader, just use the link I left in the description if you're watching on YouTube, or at the end of the associated blog post if you're watching on our website. When God says so, this conversation about pioneering leadership will continue. Until then, let God renew your thinking, align your responses, and empower you to become who you really are. Final note, don't remix everything when God reroutes you. Some things, like modesty, are worth retaining. Have an incredible day.